3 is Old Town. And as we get into this, we've got, again, some boards to refer to over on the side. Obviously, lots of expertise on the staff, and the committees also had a lot of discussion related to Old Town. When you think about this big move, again, I want to comment that the graphic that we're using to communicate what this big move is about, this graphic goes beyond the Old Town Design District and it really includes the broader area to emphasize that this concept is about the connections all the way from 35 over to the DCTA station. And so as you think about this big move, we're talking not just about the design, the area that's covered by the design district, but also that extension. And so part of what we see as the target here with Old Town is the idea that on the one hand, that historic center is a way to define Lewisville, which is obviously something you've been working on for quite some time. But we think that by expanding this concept to make those connections, that you've got even more opportunity to create those places for urban living and the restaurants and entertainment and so forth. Part of the target here is encouraging development that solidifies the core, and really part of this is about that space in between the square and the DCTA station, and the kind of development to knit that together so that it is both more identifiable, so that it creates opportunities for people to live and for businesses to locate in that broader area. And then the third point there about the clear branding strategy, again, back to your comment, Neil, I guess we're cleaning the carpets today. So the notion of the branding to solidify that further, and I know there's been some conversation, and the committee had some discussion about the different studies and the different areas within that. One of the examples that we felt was worth thinking about here is the idea of this broader area of this big move, which we call Old Town at this point, that there might be within that sub-districts that have their own different sorts of activity and identity. If you think about something like downtown Fort Worth or downtown Dallas, there's an idea of downtown, but then there are individual things. In Dallas, for instance, you've got the Arts District, you've got the West End, and they have somewhat different characters, but they're part of downtown. So as we think about this bigger area, that might be an example or a model of how to think about getting things to happen throughout this whole section. So why do we think this is a big move? Obviously, we want to induce that reinvestment and continue the revitalization that's going on in Old Town, get the best return on the investments the city has made and is making right now in this Old Town area, and strengthen this as the sense of the community center. We'll talk later on about other focal points within the city, but when it comes to that center, that kind of most urban gathering place, we really see this Old Town area being that. We want this to be a destination for folks, for coming to walk around, to shop, to enjoy entertainment, and for transit-oriented development adjacent to that DCTA station. This needs to expand the offerings here so that there is more for people to come to than what exists today. And then there needs to be a clear marketing strategy. So again, that same point about the need to market. So all of those things together make it seem to us that Old Town needs to be an important big move in the vision of what Lewisville should be like in 2025. Now, the Old Town has quite a few action priorities, so let me try to go through those fairly quickly. There are 10 for Old Town, and so once I've gone through those, I'm sure that there will be questions and discussion, but let me highlight those first just to kind of set the stage. The first one is prepare a real estate investment analysis to identify the catalytic development sites. And Paris Rutherford, the economist on our consulting team, will be here tomorrow, and he may, if you have some further questions, he can also elaborate on this. But we really think that the idea here is to identify some catalytic opportunities where private investors could come in and develop something that's then going to really start generating more and more energy. And so the priority that's suggested here is to identify where those parcels are, look at whether there are any issues that the city has that are creating barriers to those private investors coming in, and then try to work with them and seek them out to see if we can engender more interest in that kind of development. So this is background research. It builds on the work that you've already been doing and the work that Catalyst Commercial has been doing with y'all, but it's a real specific thing to kind of take the next move for that revitalization. The second action priority here is looking at infill opportunities between Old Town and I-35, and particularly trying to build those off of the medical district and the medical uses there. And so working more on getting this to be a place where there is an identity and where there are some designs that tell you you're coming into Old Town, but to try to support that medical activity that you already have. Number 3, establish and implement a residential infill program for Old Town. I think all the places that I know of that are working on this kind of revitalization are focused on getting more people there. Getting people there during the day for jobs, getting people living there at night so that there's business for the restaurants and the retailers and so forth. So this item we think is a priority, and there are a number of things, again, that build on work you've already done, but really to take the next steps to carry out that investment, get the private sector engaged in that, and potentially even look at the idea of a master developer who can help to really bring in those private folks. Action priority number 4 is one that we heard a lot from the committees, and that is the restaurant infill project opportunities. I think both the committees felt like that was really one of those important magnets or attractors. Paris also, I think this is one of the things that he probably will share with you, that he really sees that restaurants as something that will draw people. I heard an interesting thing on the radio a couple days ago where they were saying, no, it's not the case that one restaurant feels like the second one in is going to compete, but having a district where there are many restaurants where people can say, well, let's go to that district and then figure out which restaurant we want to go to, that strengthens all of them. And Greg, obviously, you know a lot more about that than I do, but I think that there's a real value in looking at restaurants as one of those important aspects of the revitalization of Old Town. Number 5, potential targets for supermarket or smaller scale grocery stores. This is an important concern for attracting residential into Old Town, and it's again one of the ones that the committees identified as something that we need to look at. Number 6, prioritize the improvements to Keeley Street and the possible Keeley Mill couplet. We can get into more detail on exactly what that means as we get into the questions and answers, but the basic idea is that the street work that's going on now is being built with an idea to support revitalization, and getting those improvements going is important. Additional activities to bring people to Old Town. There's only so many meals you can eat in a day, so there's only so many times you can go to a restaurant. There's only so many dresses or shirts that you want to buy. So there need to be other activities as well in Old Town. Rudy and Leroy, this is the one we were talking about last night after the session, the idea of other kinds of things that bring people to Old Town. And some of that could be the higher education classes that Rudy, you were talking about last night. The makerspace, I was telling the two of them about this idea, which is really like a community center, but with tools for people to prototype manufacturing, to develop their own ideas that could then lead to businesses as well as kind of hobby activities. These things are really popular, and the questions, Donna was sharing with me that she had recently visited one of these, and so we can get into more discussion about that as you'd like when we get into our dialogue. But basically the point here is looking at additional sorts of activities that draw people in and get people coming back, so that once they're there, they find out what else they can do in Old Town. The Old Town events, you already have things going on, but to expand that and do more of those. Partner with the existing nonprofits for unique events, and I understand that the Brew Fest, this is the first year that that's in Lewisville, but that's an example of the kind of events, again, that goes back to getting people down into Old Town so they discover what you've got. And then the last priority here is looking at this area, this Old Town, and that connection all the way over to the station as being a place for different kinds of residential choices that you may not have in other parts of Lewisville. Examples here, you see high-end lofts, live-work units where somebody has an office or a studio downstairs and lives above it. Townhomes, things like that, that are more dense, so that, again, there's more people within walking distance, but also that starts to diversify the housing choices that people have available to them in Lewisville. So that's the list of the action priorities for Old Town. Let me go now to that discussion and direction, and as I said, I know that there are a number of folks on the staff and the committees who have background information to elaborate on those items. But before we get into that elaborating, let's hear what your thoughts are and what your questions are so we can focus that effectively. Who wants to start? Leroy, let me ask you to kick us off on this one. What do you think about the Old Town big move?
Well, I feel like the city pays a lot of attention already to Old Town.
Okay.
I think the basic groundwork is there. It's been done by the city, and we need to continue along that avenue, especially tying it to the transportation system. In my opinion, and also we need to increase the density in order to make the whole area a community, to my opinion.
Okay.
I think it would be very successful. We're on the track of the restaurants, and if we can get the live entertainment district up and going, I think it would go a long way into making that really a very popular destination point.
Okay. Great. Good. What about others of you all?
I think there's a lot that's already in motion in Old Town. I mean, some of the things I picked up on, and I said, yeah, that would be good too, is the creating a better sense of when you arrive there. Because it isn't, we know, we have a boundary on the map, and we know what it is, but it's very dangerous. You know, again, especially for a visitor, if suddenly they see these signs, what does that mean? Where, you know, when did I get here? Was that Old Town?
So that gateway identity.
The other thing that this is getting a little bit in the weeds, so I can put it out there for discussion, just a comment, but we're going to have to decide pretty quickly what we're doing with this Old Town name that we're very much accustomed to, the main and mill that the retailers have created. And, you know, who wins the argument? What are we going to do with that? Is it just going to create ambiguity and confusion? You know, where's this going to go?
I got hung on trying to say.
I remember that. Man, in passing at one meeting, we'll let it
Well, I got hung on. You can't change Old Town, it's Old Town, it's always been Old Town, don't ever change it. Well, I just try, instead of making it sound old, just historic downtown. It's like, oh, you don't touch Old Town.
Yeah, and I was going to say, that was, yeah, we don't want any more hand slapping. Yeah. And that actually partly is the reason why I mentioned the idea about sub-districts within this larger space, because it could well be that's a way to address that kind of
concern. It would for Dallas as far as having like the West End and developed, and, you know, people at the Arts District, people have a sense of there's more than, first of all, there's more than one thing going on.
Right.
Because, you know, West End, I think the restaurants and some museums and Arts District, we know what that is, developments, clubs, and nightlife. So,
and each one of those is a discrete geographic area.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
right.
we have density.
You don't have that yet, but you know, one of the things I worked on when I was the director of the Dallas plan, we had the center city as one of our main priorities. And so we were involved in the programs to differentiate those districts. And at the time we were doing that, some of those districts didn't have much going on either, like Farmers Market had almost nothing going on. And the connections were not there at all. And so to me, you should take the opportunity now to think about this bigger area and think about those sub-districts where they make sense, so that you can be kind of using that as the development happens and start to create that identity to start with, instead of having to try to retrofit it and have the debates about, well, what's this and what's that, and this is a no man's land in between.
Already we're naturally, and you're right, because it's a smaller area than obviously Dallas, but it's naturally started a little bit. I mean, you have the medical district of Old Town.
Right.
The main and mill, as they're calling it, is the central, obviously the transportation on the other end.
Yeah. So there might be three kinds of things. Maybe there's some other variety. Bob, I know you wanted to add into this conversation.
The idea of extending the idea of Old Town to 35 was one of the big things in our committee, that there needs to be a presence as people come off of 35 to know, this is where Old Town is. But we also, and I was going to mention this earlier on the extending the green, but we also said that same thing has to happen for Lake Park. That we don't want Lake Park, if we want Lake Park or the green space to be a destination, when people come off of 35, they have to know we're getting into that area. We want to have something that will allow people to know that they're heading in that direction and that it's attractive.
Okay,
Well,
so
that goes back to my original point. Okay, so that's the hostel district then. You just sub-branded that front entrance as the hostel district, not Old Town, not Main and Mill. So,
Well, it's Old Town.
it's
It's the medical district of,
yeah,
that's,
but
Yeah, maybe
but
it'd
if
be-
you start, and we go, but if you're gonna go that route, you need to really have that conversation.
In a sense, it's part of an overall branding program, and you want to look at it in total.
There was a lot of discussion in the committee that also Old Town should extend all the way down to 121 as well, that gateway.
So, and again, not to get into all the details and solve the question right now, but with Dallas's downtown, if you go down there now and you see those wayfinding signs, I was on the team that developed that idea, and what we did with that is that there is commonality in all of them, but yet each of those sub-districts is a little different. So there are techniques to do that. The important question at this stage of the game is this part of the action priority to figure it out?
When council adopted the Old Town Transit-Oriented Development Plan 2 years ago, that Old Town concept was extended all the way to 121. So now it extends all the way around the station. What confuses sometimes is the TIF district versus the Old Town district. So the TIF district has what you see in the shaded area, but the Old Town itself has that connotation.
That's exactly right. Old Town is
Entertainment matches
basically
in a little
everything.
smaller area within
Old
the.
Town is basically everything on the east side of the freeway over to 121.
I should.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's always been that. Then, to do some redevelopment, we created the TIF zone that had to be a much smaller area, because you couldn't get, we could have got everybody buying that TIF zone.
Right, and remember you had that 15% requirement of residential, so you can't have any more than 15%. That's why you see the boundary. If you look at this map, this is our new map we created, the light shade area is the TIF zone. So as you can see, even on this map, the boundary is larger. The TIF zone is this brownish area, because all of this residential had to be left out of the TIF zone because of statutory requirements.
And it is going to go all the way to 35.
It
Mill
is.
Street's going all the way,
Yeah.
going to go all the way down.
Yeah, I don't have a map with me, I think, but it does go, it goes basically clear extends all around the station here. So we could capture all of that land for transit-oriented development.
I think Neil did a big point. A lot of this stuff's already, can you mention anything about what you did to me last night about on where
Sure. We could, I mean, as Councilman Vaughn said, and I think everybody else, and Councilman Ferguson, that a lot has been happening in Old Town just because council has put their focus on it for the past 10 years. So we are now actually seeing the fruit of that labor. We're starting to see the council approve that agreement for new restaurant development. In terms of residential, which is truly the key to developing Old Town and having more of a vital Old Town, is having that new residential come in. It's not only revitalizing the existing residential, but having new residential come in. So the townhomes that were approved at 67 new units of townhomes. Of course, the Pulte townhomes that we have, Main Street Village, very successful project. Then next to it, we have that 72-unit townhome that's under construction right now. They're starting their second phase, so they're going to put that entire, so right now, I know that it's been kind of slow to start, but they are submitting plans for the rest of that phase to do it all as one phase.
They actually sold some of the homes.
They've sold two, just last week, they've had two closing, right, at $200,000 each. So those units are selling really well. What we refer to as Guzik Shopping Center, the shopping center right behind Main Street, which was recently purchased by Centurion American, they have brought in a plan to us to actually develop it all as single-family residential. So they have a new urban concept. It's actually a David Whitley concept. It's a 3-story detached product, but it's dense, so it really lends itself to downtown. So what they have now is 78 units of single-family detached residential in the price range of $250 to $350. So that's going to be great for our town. Then the same developer has put a contract on a piece of property north of College by the station, what we reference to as Old Meat Purveyor's property, and that's a very great sign because it relates back to our zoning and what the mayor said about. So that zoning is now warehouse district. Warehouse district. Thank you. So this is the piece we are talking about right now, right? This piece right here that is under contract again for residential development. So I just want to reference what we extended Old Town to. So basically right now the TOD district comes across from here and almost all the way to Valley Ridge and back on 121. So this is now the boundary of what we reference as Old Town for development and redevelopment purposes. But anyway, so yeah, a lot going on. The main mill that's going to be a catalyst infrastructure project is really going to create that entry into Old Town. I think is another one that's really under design right now. So I think in 2 years, that whole character is going to be so pulled together and something different than what we see today. And then from that point on is a platform to really jump off. Then at that point, we probably won't need to give as much incentives. Now people know what our Old Town is all about, and we have enough mass in there that we would just continue redeveloping and continue development.
So as we're thinking about this Vision 2025, clearly Old Town needs to be emphasized. It needs to, at least to us, needs to be a big move. And so I think that's what we're trying to accomplish here is show that and put that in this context of this bigger picture. Nika, I don't know if you might have some additional comments on, you're talking about things that are happening in the next 2 years that are already underway, things that are really making a change in this area. The things that we've identified as these action priorities are also thought to be, the next couple of years, maybe a little bit longer than 2 years. Are there any of the others of these that you want to elaborate on for council so they understand how this builds on the things that are happening now?
I think one of the things we really need to focus on is be very responsive to development. The other thing that it's extremely important and one of the reasons that we've had some success here is actually going out and seeking developers who want to do these developments here. That's very important because we have some developers now that have never done any development, didn't know about Lewisville. So being out there and truly talking about the assets of Lewisville, we call it now in our marketing package the Lewisville Advantage. That's what we need to be out there doing because you need to have someone that's on board with you. And so the idea of that master developer for the remainder of the Old Town, someone that can actually put parcels together. One of our main challenges in this area is the fragmentation of parcels. And not being able
the point of that we've got here.
There, exactly, which is very difficult to bring all these owners together. someone that can actually focus on that, and that would be their primary responsibility to do that, is going to go a long, long way. That's something really good to look at.
Okay. Are there others, Anika, to elaborate on, or are there others that you all have questions on? Are these the right moves to build on what's already happening?
One thing, talked about that earlier, was the medical, expanding that. And you heard, I don't know if all of you heard last night, but Chris talked about that last night. They had that area that they were hoping to be, what they call MOBs, medical
Yeah, office
buildings. And basically, he said they reached out to Baylor and all of them, and they said with the new healthcare reform act that's up now, that does not lend to medical office buildings being expanded. And that's why they turned that way. They said he had 70-something houses, he was going to put lots.
I think so, that was something like
And
that.
he had said they envisioned all that being medical, but the way it is now, that they don't see that, the medical profession does not see that expanding for quite some time, so they gave up on the side of the house. So that's something I think we need to stand to. I'm not saying it couldn't someday, but the way it stands right now, they're just not, I talked with Lewisville Hospital when we did the emergency thing. Really, that's the only thing that people are saying now is emergency. And of course, I thought that it was supposed to keep people from going to emergency, but it's just creating more. But they're not interested in doing anything because there's no money there.
I think that's a really interesting point, and what we need to look at again is more the long-range plan. What Chris is looking at is what's advantageous today. As he said, he's in the business of making money. So residential.
It's been there for 10,
Right.
12 years, and he had been able to turn it.
Right, but right now residential is so hot. We are looking at, everybody's coming in and wanting to rezone everything to residential. That's one thing that you guys are gonna also get pressure on. Don't zone everything. There are strategic areas that we can zone to residential, which is going to be very beneficial to us. Some areas we really need to save, and I think what you said, Mayor, working with our existing hospital, taking advantage of that big campus and to see what we can do, going towards the highway actually, the area that we have now designated between Valley Ridge and Fox basically on our I-35 redevelopment plan as primarily office, medical research, creating that medical campus beyond the medical campus on Main Street is something we need to focus on.
And I think that
do the land use plan.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's something that is perhaps a bit different than what Chris was talking about, in that you've got that hospital there.
Right.
And so that wayfinding to tell people where they're at and where, how that connects, and being in position for future kinds of activities. Not that it's going to be, not next year, but over time as some of the healthcare stuff settles out, I know the Urban Land Institute every year does a report called Emerging Trends, where they talk to developers around the country about what they see happening. And the last couple of years, it's been that trend that Nika was just mentioning about residential, that residential is hot, it's the thing you can get financing for and so forth. And ULI sees that that's starting to shift. This year, part of what they're looking at is a little more on the side of industrial, not the old kind of industrial, but more of the office and distribution kind of industrial. And I think there are some opportunities that may shift, and so you want to be ready for that at that medical center area. Okay. Other comments, the residential info program we talked about again just now. And the TOD, this builds on your the TOD study that you have already completed. Are there questions or comments or other thoughts on these action priorities for Old Town?
Well, was there any interest coming from any of the committees about tying Old Town to Lake Lewisville?
Yes, I think there was, and I'm looking to see if any of the particular committees are here to want to comment on that. Or James?
Connectivity Committee did talk about that primarily through transit, but also through the trail. They mostly looked at connection there and also some wayfinding signage.
One thing I think we need to keep in mind is, I love events, I love having them, I love going to everything, but I think Rudy and Greg will remember, we got stretched too thin in those happenings. We were trying to put on events every which way and everything. And they came to us and said, are we really getting what? Are we really getting money? Are we getting any, are we getting a bang for the buck? Are we getting benefits? We're doing all these small events and this and that, we're spreading our money out. Do we want to more concentrate? When we decided to come back to concert because we went through a downturn in the economy. I'm not saying we shouldn't do the events we're in now. I'm not saying that. But when you start looking at that, sometimes you can stretch yourself so thin that the events you have, you're going to have 500 people at it. And you spend a lot of money, so is the event really beneficial to get you back? Something we need to be careful of.
Along that line, one thing I think, it seems like we're going in the direction of we're getting more, maybe smaller events, but they're being headed off by other groups. Cities obviously still involved in doing some support. Like Chalk This Way is a good example, the Brewfest is another good example, to where these organizations are kind of taking the lead, and we're kind of...
That's correct, and that's key.
Right.
It's not that it takes all the responsibility off the back of the city, because you still have a lot of involvement, but getting, private groups to come in and put an event together and the vendors on it, I think it puts a different spin on it.
It does.
So as we think about this action priority 8, we maybe should add some emphasis here about events where there are other groups that are actively engaged in the city is supporting them. That sounds like what I'm hearing from you.
As far as the overall whole plan, I've related just to see the emphasis on the residential
Okay.
part of it. And it's great to hear that that new development's coming out by the train station. I'm glad to see that the connection between City Hall and the railroad station is itemized in there. I think that's real important. Because that whole stretch right there, I think is just, prime for redevelopment. And obviously, with and it was mentioned by a couple other people, once we start getting new residential and a lot more residential, it's just going to create that community. That area is going to start becoming more self-sufficient, and the market will demand potentially a grocery store, a market, dry cleaners, coffee shops, additional restaurants. So the market will start to demand that as we get that residential. So I'd love to see the priority on the residential. Another thing that, and I agree too, as far as you mentioned it about the restaurant, creating that district, creating it as a destination. So people, where do you want to go to eat tonight? Instead of saying, let's just go up to I-35 and we'll decide when we get there. Or shops at Highland Village and, let's go to Old Town and we'll decide when we get there.
Yeah, there you go.
And then the additional activities that you had mentioned, I wish we could turn the clock back, because remember many years ago in Old Town, we had NCTC in Old Town. Was that their main little hub before they moved to Corinth? Do you remember?
It was.
And man, if we could turn the clock back and if we could have sunk our teeth into them and held them somewhere in Old Town, because obviously they're Harper Square now, they're doing so great in Corinth. And we had them, and did we realize at the time when they were leaving what we were losing? But also activities in businesses such as arts-related activities. For example, we have a dance studio in Old Town, and they're bringing in 40, 50, 60 students every hour, every 90 minutes, and throughout the night, throughout the Saturday afternoons, it's just rotating out. And I think that's a great type of business. And the Arts Center, with what we have there, we see people, so many different organizations and groups that are coming down, and they're, again, similar, we have the arts programs that are going on there. But just the rotation of the people that are coming and going and the activities, I think that Art Center is one of the best things we've done for additional activities.
So we really need to make sure to add arts to this item as one of the other examples to emphasize that.
On the education thing, TJ and I went, a year ago now? Yeah, went to NCTC meeting and had with them. My exact question, first campus y'all had it, City campus in Lewisville. It was in Old Town, Lewisville. Yeah, it was. Whenever you got there, I said, especially the climate moved. Why did you leave the 4-H and leave to go to Flower Mound? And I said, on neither one of those, you had transportation. You had to pay extra money to transport people pay BCPA extra money to bus those kids out there, it's a separate contract. Why didn't you keep it in November before you got a race station right there? You didn't have an answer. But you look around at people on the board,
We're thinking about it.
no, you look around at people on the board where they live.
Yeah.
Well, if you remember, one of the places they asked us was, do you know anybody in Lewisville that we can get on our board? And asked a couple of people, but that's it.
Okay.
The people that met on the board, that's what that is. I mean, it was obvious to see.
Yeah, I mean, and how many of their students actually come from Lewisville? It's John.
Okay. So as we're thinking about these additional activities that bring people to Old Town, part of how that gets carried out could well be some more activity, getting Lewisville folks involved in some of those organizations to bring some of that back here. So, Rudy, what are your thoughts about Old Town?
Nothing hadn't already been said.
Okay, all right, you're comfortable with what we're talking about? Okay. Okay, other thoughts? What I'm hearing at this point, in terms of the direction, lots of enthusiasm for the important role of Old Town, so having this be a big move. What I'm hearing, emphasis on the residential aspect of this as being an important priority. The idea of those additional locations and the idea of the identity branding, and then from that perhaps wayfinding, but figuring out what the names are, what the district is or isn't, or if there's sub-districts or whatever it is, so that there's a clearer way to communicate what we're talking about here. And I think that's one we probably need to strengthen. James, if you can flag that one on there. So as we develop the draft of a document for you, that we can put the emphasis on that point, as well as the residential and those additional activities. Are there further comments on Old Town?
This is the most fully developed in terms of where already we want to pick up.
It's happening.
Yeah, exactly. So this is build on that, make sure everybody gets that as part of your overall.
You know, some of our residents' frustration is, well, why didn't you tell us it's coming? Why didn't you can't go out there and talk about all this development until it's a done deal. If you do, things change, people don't come in, people raise the prices, and this and that. So you get the idea, like you said, I think, you said, I think, or he said, I think, we've been working on it for the last 10 years.
Yeah, right.
It has been for the last 10 years. You do it in incremental pieces, but it's not something you just go out there and let everybody know about it, other than that, and do something.
Yeah, which actually raises another point that we might try to emphasize, Wendy, as we're putting together the document, and that is these things, so many things are coming to fruition in the next year or two. The timing is probably now to make sure that there is a really effective communication campaign to tell people about all those changes. Now, it sounds like now may be the time to start telling people about all that.
And it's not just an Oak Town. You look at Main Street on the other side of the freeway. Look at what it's gone through in the last 2 years. The development is that.
Okay, all right, I think we got that. Anything else on Old Town? Okay, let's go ahead then and move into